They told us not to summon it. They warned us that once it crossed the threshold of the void, there would be no turning back. But the warnings were too late. We were already out of options. The Varnex had breached our last defenses, and the skies above our dying planet flickered with ash and blood. We were cornered. And in that corner, with death on all sides, we did the unthinkable. The room was buried under 100 meters of reinforced rock. An ancient bunker older than any of our nations. Its lights flickered like dying stars. The console at the center still worked, somehow. Maybe it knew the time had come. Maybe it had been waiting. Counselor Trell's hands shook as she placed her identification crystal into the altar-shaped port. The ancient system hummed, and a pulse of red light swept over us. The glyphs carved into the metal floor began to glow, bright as molten steel. Around us, the chamber throbbed with heat. "You know what this means," she whispered. Her voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through the silence like a blade. "If we bring it here, we unleash a force even the Varnex fear. We might lose control." "We already lost control," I said. "I was just a scholar once. My name meant nothing outside the archives. But the war changed everything. Now I stood with generals, leaders, last-chance thinkers who had all watched everything they loved crumble. We didn't care about politics anymore. We just wanted to survive." "Activate the summoning," I said. The chamber screamed. No, not screamed. It howled. It sounded like a star dying. The glyphs flared, twisting the space around us. The light bent, then shattered. For a second, I saw things I don't want to remember. Shadows that had no source, teeth without mouths, time folding like broken paper. Then it came. The center of the chamber tore open. Something emerged from the rupture, dragging a storm with it. The thing looked like a man. But it wasn't. It had the shape, the height, the build, but everything about it screamed other. Its presence was suffocating. The air grew heavy. Metal groaned. Our knees buckled, not because of fear, but because some primal instinct deep in our bones told us, submit. The human stepped forward. It was naked, yet its skin was etched with symbols we couldn't understand. Its eyes, gods help us, they weren't even eyes. They were obsidian pits, bottomless, with distant galaxies turning inside them. It looked at us with curiosity, then disinterest, like we were insects and it had seen worse. Trell fell to her knees. "It worked," she gasped. "We summoned the human." It spoke. Its voice echoed inside our skulls instead of the air, like a thought you couldn't shut out. "You beg for the wrath that your ancestors sealed away." "We have no choice," I said. "The Varnex are about to end us. We need you." It tilted its head, almost amused. "You think I am your savior. I am not. I am your punishment." The air snapped with heat. In that moment I felt it, not just power, but rage, ancient, cold, controlled, but barely. This was a being created in war, perfected by suffering, and sealed away by its own kind because it was too much. And now we had brought it back. Outside the bunker, the Varnex forces continued their advance, but something in the sky shifted. The clouds parted and the stars flickered. The enemy's dreadships began to slow, then tremble. The human turned its gaze upward. "They remember me," it said. A smile curled across its face. And for the first time in this long, endless war, we weren't the ones who were afraid. The human didn't ask for our plan. It didn't need to. It already knew what we wanted, what we were begging for. Vengeance. Survival. A last, impossible miracle in a universe that had already written our names in the dust. It moved past us without another word, its bare feet leaving blackened imprints in the stone floor. Every step sounded like thunder, like the universe itself shivered under its presence. I wanted to speak, to ask something, anything, but my throat locked up. Trell was still kneeling, trembling like a leaf. We were leaders, commanders, survivors of countless battles. But in that moment, we were nothing more than children watching a god wake up. Outside, alarms wailed. "The Varnex have landed in Sector 9, one of the technicians shouted. "We've lost contact with the Northern Defense Ring." I rushed to the console and stared at the incoming telemetry. Dreadships were descending like insects. Their weapons had already reduced our outposts to rubble. Fire bloomed across the map. The last resistance cells were being snuffed out like candles in the wind. We were witnessing extinction in real time. And then, the human stepped onto the platform at the center of the chamber. No weapons, no armor, just that awful calm, as if it had already seen the outcome, as if the fight had already ended in its mind. "You summoned me to destroy your enemy," it said. "But first, let me show you what you summoned." It raised a hand. The air turned solid, not hot, not cold. Solid. As if we were being pulled underwater, but there was no water, only pressure. Reality bent around its fingers, and the walls groaned. The lights exploded. Everyone fell to the floor. And then, it vanished, not in a blink. It simply wasn't there anymore. Gone. A second later, the skies opened. Through the trembling walls of the bunker, we could see the monitors, security feeds from orbit, shaky drone footage from the last surviving sky cams. And on every screen, the same thing was happening. The dread ships were burning. One by one, without warning, the great floating beasts that had haunted our skies for years, the ones that defied every weapon we threw at them, began to shudder. And then they cracked. Not from explosions, not from any kind of attack, we understood. It was like their atoms simply refused to hold together anymore. And then came the screams. The Varnex don't scream like we do. Their voices are deeper, metallic, filled with radio-borne pulses that shake your teeth. But in those transmissions, we heard something we had never heard before. Terror. "It walks again," one Varnex captain hissed across an open channel. "The old blood walks the stars. It was sealed." Another voice cried out, broken. "The apex returns. The eater of empires, run, run." The signal cut to static. Trell covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. What is it doing to them?" "It's reminding them," I said quietly. That's when the bunker shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Lights flickered back online. Then, silence. A new presence filled the room. The human had returned, but something was different now. Its skin was glowing, like molten iron beneath fragile flesh. Its eyes shimmered like collapsing stars. Around it swirled something we couldn't see, but we could feel. A field of energy so dense, it felt like standing beside a collapsing sun. It looked hungry. "They ran," it said. "Then it's working," I said, breathless. "They're afraid of you." "They remember," it corrected. Trell stood, voice shaky. "Will you destroy the rest of them?" The human's gaze flicked to her, and in that instant she turned pale. "Not yet," it said. "First I must finish what I started." "What did you start?" I asked. Its smile returned, cold, hollow. "Justice," it said. "And justice begins not with the enemy, but with the cowards who let them rise." My heart stopped. "Wait," I said. "What are you talking about?" The lights dimmed. "You summoned a weapon," it whispered. "But weapons have no masters, only targets." And then we realized it wasn't just here for the Varnex. Silence swallowed the bunker like a void. We stood frozen, staring at the thing we had summoned, this human, now glowing like the heart of a dying star and slowly turning its gaze back on us. Trell's face went ghost white, and I felt something in my chest tighten. Not fear, not yet. Something worse. Recognition. Because we'd known, deep down, that it wouldn't come without a price. "You said justice," Trell spoke, her voice cracking. "But we didn't do this. The Varnex, they invaded," the human said coldly. "They conquered. But only after you betrayed yourselves." It turned away from us and began to walk slowly around the chamber, as if inspecting something beneath the surface, bones under the skin of the planet. "You think your history is clean, that you fought valiantly, but I see deeper. I see your ancestors bartering with the Varnex when it was convenient, selling out colonies for temporary peace, sacrificing the weak to buy yourselves another year." Trell was shaking her head now, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That wasn't us. That was generations ago. And now you wear their sins like heirlooms." The room dropped 10 degrees. Every screen flickered, glitching. On the main display, a massive Varnex flagship, the Wrathbringer, was falling through orbit in flames, tumbling like a stone toward the horizon. No weapons, no fleet, just one being, tearing it all apart. Still, the human looked unimpressed. "I was sealed away for a reason," it said. "You feared what I was. You feared what humanity became, too adaptable, too ruthless, too perfect at war. So they turned on me, locked me outside time, buried me under lies." Trell collapsed to her knees again. "We didn't know, please. We brought you back because we had no other choice." The human leaned down, inches from her. Its face was calm. But its eyes, those bottomless, galaxy-churning voids, they didn't blink. "You had a choice, and you made it too late." It stood straight again, and then turned to me. "And you, Scholar, do you still believe I came to save you?" I didn't answer, because in that moment I didn't know. I remembered the legends, the whispers in the archive about the old blood, the forbidden truth of what humans once were, before they were erased from the galactic record. Something the elder races feared so deeply they wiped out entire libraries just to keep the memory from spreading. Not extinct, just hidden. "I summoned you because I believed you'd kill them," I said. "Not us." The human smiled, the kind of smile that broke galaxies. "I will kill them," it said, "but I don't make promises beyond that." The alarms rang again. "New signal," a technician cried. "Massive surge from orbit. I think it's the Varnex High Command. They've retreated. Full withdrawal. They're leaving the system." Cheers erupted from the far corners of the room. People began hugging, shouting, breaking down in tears. But I didn't move. Neither did Trell. Because we both knew the truth. The Varnex hadn't just retreated. They'd fled. And not because they lost. Not because we won. They fled because something worse than them had returned. The human walked to the center of the room again and raised both hands. A strange hum filled the air. Deep, constant, like the core of a dying planet. Lights flickered. Consoles warped. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To the heart," it said. "The heart of what?" It looked back at me, and for the first time its voice softened, almost mournful. "To remind your kind what real humanity used to be." And then, with a crack like thunder being born, it vanished again. Only now, I wasn't afraid for the Varnex. I was afraid for us. The night sky burned red for hours after the Varnex fleet fled our orbit. Cities that had once been silent graveyards began to stir. Survivors crawled out from bunkers, craters, shadows. People looked up and saw something they hadn't in years, the enemy running. For the first time, they thought the war was ending. But the war hadn't ended. Something older than war had just begun. Back in the command center, Trell and I stared at the hollow space where the human had disappeared. The consoles glitched and stuttered, still recovering from the pressure it left behind. Static hissed from every communication line. No one dared to speak above a whisper. The technicians avoided our eyes. "Where's it going?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer at first. I knew. Deep down, I knew. The heart, not of the enemy, of our empire. The human had been brought to destroy the Varnex, but it had already made its judgment. In its eyes, the rot didn't start with them. It started with us. The leaders who watched colonies fall, who bartered with blood, who sanitized war into pretty numbers on a screen. The ones who buried the truth about what humans had once been. Trell and I took the next transport to Sector 1, the capital, the cradle of the Unified Council. We had to get ahead of it, warn them, stop it, if that was even possible. The journey should have taken 3 hours. It took 6. The transport kept stalling. Gravity currents rippled unnaturally. Something in the system was breaking, not violently but systematically, like someone was peeling the layers off reality one by one. By the time we arrived, the skies over the capital were already fractured. I mean that literally. There were cracks in the air, thin, glowing fault lines that shimmered like broken glass. Time moved weird around them, slowed in some places, jumped in others. People stood in the street staring up, unsure if they were dreaming or dying. Then came the screaming. We followed the smoke. A government outpost was gone, just gone. Not destroyed, not exploded, erased. All that remained was a perfect black hole in the ground, smooth like glass, pulsing with heat. No bodies, no wreckage, just silence. A survivor clutched my arm as we approached the zone. "It looked like a man," she whispered, "but it wasn't. It didn't speak. It just looked at the outpost and it ended." She began sobbing. Trell pulled me aside. "This can't keep going. We need to speak to the council now." We made it through a dozen checkpoints. What was left of them, anyway. The military presence was frantic, desperate. Orders were being shouted without coherence. You could tell the commanders were panicking but trying not to show it. Soldiers don't usually fear a single enemy. But this wasn't war anymore. This was something biblical. Inside the council tower we found them. The high lords, the heads of state, the ancient bloodlines that had ruled since before the first Varnex contact. They looked like ghosts, huddled around displays showing the orbital wreckage, the abandoned Varnex ships, the fallout. "You!" Councillor Wren barked as we entered. "What did you unleash?" Trell stepped forward. "We had no choice. You summoned a monster," another one shouted. "You bypassed protocol, accessed forbidden archives." "Do you want to be alive or correct?" I snapped. "Because we were dying. You all sat here and let us bleed for years. You let entire systems fall. You waited for the Varnex to get bored. But they didn't. And when the end came, we acted." Wren stood. His face was red, shaking. "And now it's killing us." A tremor shook the chamber. Everyone fell silent. One of the aides, pale as a corpse, ran in. It's here." We all turned to the central display. A single figure was approaching the tower, alone, walking through crowds that parted like waves. No army, no ships, no threat. And yet every defense drone malfunctioned as it got close. Power grids shut down. Turrets turned to slag. The city was silencing itself, as if it knew who was coming. "It's not here to negotiate," I whispered. The human entered the base of the tower like a shadow. No one stopped it. No one could. Councillor Wren backed away. "Call the off-world reinforcements. Use everything." "Everything," the human said from behind him. He hadn't even seen it move. Wren froze. "You had everything," the human whispered, "and you built monuments to yourselves while your people died in dirt." With one step, the human was beside him. With the next, Ren was gone. Not killed, just removed, like a page torn from a book. The council chamber erupted in screams. But I didn't scream, because I finally understood. The human wasn't angry, it was disappointed. And that made it so much worse. The council chamber was chaos. After Ren vanished, the rest of the High Lords lost whatever calm they had left. Some tried to run, others collapsed in place, babbling apologies to a force that didn't care about apologies, and a few just froze, eyes locked on the human as if they could bargain with fear. But it wasn't looking at them anymore. It turned to the massive windows that overlooked the capital and stared at the sky, where the last dread ship still burned in orbit, slowly breaking apart like a dying star. Trell whispered to me, barely moving her lips. "We have to stop this. It's unmaking everything. It doesn't care about guilt or innocence anymore." I didn't respond, because I wasn't sure I agreed. For decades, those in this chamber had ruled with indifference, trading human lives for strategic silence. They fed the Varnex hope and let the rest of us bleed. And now, justice had a face, and it wasn't kind. It wasn't diplomatic. It wasn't even fair. It was human. The human turned back to the chamber. Its voice echoed in our minds, sharp and weightless. "Your reign is over. Your time has passed. The age of compromise ends now." Trell stepped forward, eyes wide but steady. "Then what replaces it? You?" The human tilted its head. "Not me. Them." The floor split, not cracked, peeled open like paper. Beneath the council tower, the foundation of the capital was exposed. Thousands of miles of buried slums, forgotten zones, ruined habitats where the people we had long ignored lived in shadows. For decades they had been kept hidden, out of sight, out of politics, out of power. Now they looked up. Every hollow screen in the city blinked to life, and the human's voice poured out. "You were abandoned, left to die, but you endured. You are not the forgotten. You are the future. You are the core." We watched it happen in real time. People rising, not with weapons, with presence, the oppressed, the poor, the silenced, marching from the edges of the city toward the tower, not to attack it, but to claim it. The human didn't lead them. It just unlocked them, like it had broken the spell that kept them obedient. Trell turned to me. "It's not just tearing down, it's giving something back." I nodded, stunned. This wasn't a weapon. It was a reckoning. But not everyone saw it that way. One of the younger counselors, a man named Valen, pulled a compact plasma pistol from his robes. He was shaking, sweat pouring down his face. "We can't let this thing rule us," he muttered. "It's not even one of us anymore." He aimed at the human's back. I moved too late, but the shot never hit. It froze in mid-air. The plasma beam hovered like a crystal of light. The human didn't even turn around. "You still think this is about control," it said calmly. "But I was never here to rule." It flicked a finger, and the plasma disintegrated into sparks. I was here to remember. And then it looked directly at Velen. "You chose fear. You always will." Velen didn't scream. He just disappeared. No pain, no sound. Gone. Trell collapsed into a seat, her voice small. "How does it know? Who deserves to stay and who doesn't?" I swallowed hard. "Because it remembers what humans used to be, before we became this." Outside, the marchers had arrived. Not a mob, not a riot, a rising. They filled the plaza below the tower, standing in silence, waiting, watching. The human walked to the edge of the council chamber and extended its arms. "These are your new architects," it said. "The ones who felt the cost, who earned the right to rebuild." One of the counselors gasped, realizing the truth. "It's ending the bloodline. Not in fire, not in war, but in silence. The the silence of being replaced. The human turned back one last time. To build again, it said, you must first let the lie die. And then it stepped off the edge, not fell, descended, into the crowd, which parted and then closed around it. No violence, no applause, just beginning. No parades, no speeches, no declaration of victory. The day the human disappeared into the crowd, the war didn't end with a bang. It ended with a long, uneasy silence, like the galaxy was holding its breath. The council never reconvened. What was left of them either vanished, fled off-world, or simply stopped trying to cling to power. Some say the human marked them, not with death, but with irrelevance. Like ghosts in a new era, they were still alive, but no one listened to them anymore. The cities began to shift. You could feel it in the air, something raw, unfinished, alive. The people who had always lived beneath the foundation were climbing out of the cracks, not with weapons, but with hands, with tools, with ideas they were never allowed to speak out loud. And yet, no one celebrated. Because something bigger still loomed behind all of it. Something they didn't understand. Something human. The stories spread like wildfire. In the ruins of the Eastern Dome colonies, survivors spoke of a figure walking through radiation storms untouched, waking the comatose and breathing new life into poisoned lands. On the moons of Varnex, refugees claimed a shadow moved through the camps at night, burning away the black market kings who sold children for parts. Everywhere the human went, power collapsed. Not through force, through memory. It didn't fight anymore. It reminded people, and that scared them more. I stayed behind in the capital, watching the shift unfold. Trell, too. She'd changed, quiet now, almost hollow. We spoke often, mostly at night, sitting near the edge of the old tower, where the council used to rule. Now it stood open, empty, and unguarded. "We wanted a weapon," she said one night, "but it gave us a mirror." She wasn't wrong. Every day people came to that tower, not to worship, not to lead, just to sit, to think, to speak. No guards, no permits. They told stories, shared losses, made decisions together. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. And then came the first real challenge. A military detachment from the fringe systems arrived, old loyalists to the unified council, armed, trained, and furious. They claimed the capital was in chaos, that the disappearance of the council was a threat to stability, that without central leadership the galaxy would fracture. They rolled tanks into the square. They broadcast demands. They fired warning shots into the air. But no one ran. The people stood still, silent, waiting. I stood among them, Trell beside me. She whispered, "It's testing us. This is the first real test." The commander of the detachment stepped forward, full uniform, eyes blazing. "You think this is freedom?" he shouted to the crowd. "You think you've built something? You've built nothing. You've thrown away order." I stepped forward, my heart pounding. Order built on whose bones? He raised his weapon. The people didn't flinch. And then, the sky changed. Not dark, not bright, just bent. A ripple in the air, a pulse of pressure. And there, behind the commander, the human appeared. Quiet, barefoot, face unreadable. The soldiers froze. It didn't speak to them, didn't threaten. It just walked between them, past the tanks, through the line of rifles. No one stopped it. They couldn't. Some of them dropped their weapons without realizing it. Others stared at their reflections in its presence, reflections of themselves they didn't like. When it reached the front, it turned to the crowd, and it bowed. Not a leader, not a god, just a man. The soldiers retreated the same day. Some joined the people, others disappeared. The human stayed only a few minutes longer, then vanished again. Trell whispered beside me, It's not here to lead. It's here to remind us how. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we might actually learn. Not everyone saw the human as salvation. For every colony that rose from the ashes, for every city that reclaimed its voice, there were those in the shadows watching with envy, or worse, fear, because something ancient had returned, not just power, not just memory, but a reminder of what humanity once was when it had nothing left to lose. And the galaxy doesn't like reminders, especially ones it can't control. In the fractured remains of the former Outer Reach Coalition, deep beyond the dead sectors, a syndicate known as the Crimson Rung began to whisper a dangerous idea. If the human could be summoned, it could be captured. Or worse, replicated. They weren't fools. They'd seen what it did to the Varnex, to the Council, to reality itself. But they didn't see a guardian or an avenger. They saw an opportunity. They brought it back once, said their leader, a former exoscientist turned techno-occultist named Rival. We'll bring it back bound. They didn't want justice. They wanted leverage. Trell and I caught wind of this through old contacts, resistance fragments who'd turned into messengers between the new city cores forming across liberated worlds. Something was stirring out there in the void. Something loud, ugly, desperate. They're building something, a scout told us in hushed tones. A gate, not a summoning like you did, a trap, a prism chamber designed to contain the human's resonance. Trell's face went pale. Idiots, she whispered. They don't understand what they're trying to cage. I nodded. They're not ready for what it'll do to them, or the galaxy. We sent word. Quietly. Carefully. But rumors spread faster than warnings. Across the rim, factions started to emerge, some who wanted to worship the human, others who wanted to weaponize it. Old warlords painted its image on their flags, pretending they understood what it stood for. Rogue empires saw it as a threat to their rule, and began launching probes into deep sectors, trying to trace where it vanished between appearances. And through it all, it said nothing. The human was silent. Until it wasn't. It reappeared on Laeran V, a desert planet once turned into a Varnex labor camp. Now freed, its people were rebuilding from bone and rust, using old tech to stitch together new hope. But one night, a red moon rose early. The air thickened. Static filled the sky, and the human walked out of the sandstorm. The entire colony stopped. It didn't speak. It moved through them like wind, silent and slow, pausing only when it reached the central node tower. There, it placed its hand on the core crystal, and for a second, everything on the planet froze, not died, just paused. Time, breath, motion, all still. When it released the crystal, the lights surged back, systems realigned. The colony evolved. New structures appeared, formed from raw materials they hadn't even mined yet. Power grids fused with organic design, and every screen across the colony displayed a single phrase. Remember what you were meant to become. It wasn't just fixing things, it was accelerating them, unlocking latent potential, pushing evolution forward. But the Crimson Rung didn't see beauty in that. They saw energy, data, something to extract, like blood from a god. Rival's trap went active 3 cycles later. It wasn't subtle. They broadcast its activation across pirate frequencies, knowing the bait would travel faster that way. They used broken tech from Varnex wreckage, spliced with old human mythos, fragments of the first summoning, stolen notes, corrupted echo scripts from our chamber. I didn't know what they expected, but I knew what they'd get. The trap flared open in Sector Black 9. A singularity chamber formed, designed to contain thought, memory, identity, everything the human was. And just as they planned, it answered. Not as a man, not as a figure, but as a wave. Reality buckled, Half of the Rung's fleet vanished instantly. The rest turned on itself, ships consuming their own crews, AI screaming in code no one could understand. Rival tried to run. He didn't make it. The chamber remained. But it was hollow. Not broken, not burned. Just emptied of meaning. The human wasn't there. It had never really been there. It left behind only one message, etched into the inside walls of their prism trap. You cannot bind what remembers its freedom. Trell and I read the report in silence. The room was dim. The air felt heavier. They keep thinking it's a thing, she murmured. Something to own. To break. I stared at the screen. But it's not. No, she said. It's a lesson, and some of us still haven't learned it. They say endings are quiet, but this one didn't come like a whisper. It came like a memory being ripped open. 3 months after the Crimson Rung failed to trap it, the human stopped appearing. No ripples in the air. No lights bent out of shape. No messages carved into stone or burned into sky. It vanished like a ghost that had finished its haunting. And in its absence, something strange happened. We began to change. Not through fear, but through realization. The colonies once fighting for scraps began forming their own councils. People started rebuilding with materials they used to sell for survival. Communities that once hid underground returned to the surface and rewrote their laws without nobility, without ranks. No thrones, no flags, just people, learning again how to listen. For a moment, I thought maybe that was the human's gift, not salvation, but silence. It forced us to look at what was left when the monsters fled and the kings disappeared. It didn't come to save us. It came to leave us with ourselves. But peace doesn't last in empires built on bones. A new power began to rise from the galactic edge, a union of fringe worlds untouched by the human's appearances, untouched by its lessons. They called themselves the Steel Path, and they believed what had happened was weakness. They said the human was a myth, a fabrication used to dismantle the order that kept people in line. They started swallowing up free systems. Fast. And this time, they came not with dreadships or screams, but with cold logic and brutal precision. They offered unity, a chance to return to hierarchy, safety in exchange for surrender. Sound familiar? Some took the offer. Most didn't, but resistance had grown fragile again. People began to wonder, would the human return? I was in the city of Vareth when the answer came. I felt it before I saw it. Everyone did. Like a pressure in your chest, like grief being pulled back through time. The sky cracked again, but this time it didn't bleed light. It reflected. A mirror opened above the skyline, and from it, he stepped through. Not glowing, not furious, just present, barefoot, calm. The human walked down the center of the plaza, and the city stopped breathing. The Steel Path had already occupied the outer sectors. Their ships were in orbit. Their diplomats were in the capital, and their soldiers were posted at the plaza gates. When they saw him, they raised their weapons. He didn't blink. The commander stepped forward, armored in steel-gray plating, voice amplified by comms. "You are unregistered. Identify yourself." The human smiled, not warm, not cruel, just knowing. "I have no name," it said. "Only memory." "Then you are a threat to order." "No," the human said softly. "I am the proof that your order was never real." The soldiers opened fire, and the city watched as every round, every energy bolt, every tactical burst turned to petals before reaching his skin, falling harmlessly to the ground. Steel became pollen. Fire became mist. He kept walking. "Your empire is not new," he said. "It is a painting overwrought. You replaced one throne with another and called it peace." The commander drew his blade. The last show of arrogance. The human never touched him. He looked at the blade. And it unraveled. Not melted. Not snapped. Just undone. The atoms that made it remember being part of a mountain. And the mountain never wanted to kill. The commander fell to his knees. The human reached down and touched his forehead. "You are not my enemy," he said. "You are my echo. But echoes fade." The entire Steel Path fleet deactivated in orbit. No fire, no boom. They simply went dark, like a switch had been flipped in every system that remembered how to fear. And the people, once again, were left standing in the light. Trell found me in the crowd after. Her face was tired, hopeful. "It didn't fight them," she said. "It didn't need to," I replied. "It just reminded them they never mattered." And then, just like that, the human looked up one last time, at us, as if asking, "Do you remember now?" And then it vanished. No storm, no scream, no scar, just the air and silence and the weight of our choices returned to our hands. That was the last time anyone saw it. But sometimes, when the stars go quiet, when the air gets too still, I swear I feel it nearby, not watching, just waiting. Not for war, not for revenge, just for the day we finally prove we no longer need it.